I plan to speak about the freedom struggle and the maternal instinct, and the idea of non-violence, which accompanies the idea of maternity, and the nurturing and the nourishing aspect of the of the identity of the mother. So Mahatma Gandhi was instrumental in drawing out the women from their homes during the Indian struggle for independence. And since women were generally considered to be the weaker sex and not capable of much physical and intellectual rigor, Gandhi strategized their participation on the grounds of the qualities inherent in womanhood rather than deny their feminine status. So the two aspects that came out strikingly as a result of this strategic positioning of women the first one was women's spirituality, and the other was the maternal instinct. So, so the moment you highlight the maternal instinct or the capacity of to become a mother in some entity, then certain other qualities of significance obviously get highlighted, like, so the identity of the mother becomes a highly suitable identity which is worthy of taking part in the struggle for independence, because you know that motherhood, along with the term motherhood, comes sacrifice, and comes endurance and resilience, and the labor and the ability to put up with long hours of suffering. So we can say that by highlighting the motherhood aspect, women came to embody love, which mothers are full of love, so for the country, and sacrifice again for the country, and steadfastness and resilience. And so we know that before Gandhi came onto the Indian scene, he had worked with women in South Africa, and his wife had been an active companion. And he understood, somehow through the qualities of Ba, probably he had developed a kind of a very fundamental and basic understanding of the powers that reside within women. So I think, but then probably the problematic was, of course, the conservative society and the way women were viewed, so they were viewed as maybe ignorant or not worthy of participating in serious debate, and they could hardly be considered as, the torch bearers of something as serious and as, as crucial as the struggle for independence. And so, this idea of maternity, or the idea of motherhood, and also, by extension, looking at in the national space, that is India, in the material reality of India, also as feminine and as a motherland, also, kind of helped to create the identity of, create motherhood as a kind of, I would say, the emblem or the logo for fighting. In fact, there have been moments in during the struggle where men have been exhorted to become like women, and women have been, but before that happened, when women were encouraged, like educational reforms were happening, or there was, there were all these committees and these bodies which were working for the abolition of other malpractices like sati and other such, social practices which were very detrimental to the status of women. The education of women was a contentious issue. It might seem a very simple thing for us today, but at that point of time, it was not such an easily acceptable thing. So this also, I think, the idea of uplifting, empowering, educating women also got an impetus by the idea that these are the women who will be the like the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. This was what was said by Sarojini Naidu and later, Sarojini Naidu says that educate your women and the nation will take care of itself. For it is as true today as it was yesterday and will be at the end of human life that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. She said this in 1906. Then in 1910, you have Bikaji Kama repeating the same. So, there is this idea that the mothers of men need to be manly. By manly here means, acquiring the qualities of education, or, being vocal, or being able to participate side by side, shoulder to shoulder. So this idea of motherhood, was not restricted just to the idea of, that abla जीवन है तुम्हारी यही कहानी आंचल में है दूध और आँखों में पानी, but it was transformed into an idea of strength, and this strength was being drawn from the idea of the identity of the mother. That is, a mother has to be strong. So this strength, the quality of strength, since it has been normally attributed to masculinity, here gets, blurred. The gender distinctions get blurred by invoking the idea of the strength of motherhood. And therefore, the, motherhood, and with motherhood, the real purpose behind Gandhi's, the entire philosophy that Gandhi was propagating, and which was which has been hailed and lauded by the world over, the philosophy of satyagraha and non-violence, is of course inevitably linked to the idea of motherhood. So here you are able to deal with a complex notion of both strength and non-violence. Then you have Surendranath Banerjee saying that sink your differences, like he's telling the Indian people that sink your differences and unite under the banner of the religion of motherhood. So the religion of motherhood became, it became the religion. I mean, this secularization also, the idea of motherhood as floated by Gandhi probably also, helped to create a grand new space for the Indian people, which was secular and which was not drawing upon just Hindu ritual, like what Annie Besant and the others were initially, because they wanted to preserve the Indian culture with all good intentions. But this carving out of a secular space was successfully sculpted by Gandhi by creating a unique idea of motherhood, which is devoid of ritual, but which contains these qualities of steadfastness and unflinching faith. And so a kind of, we can say that a semi-mystical vision of motherhood was floated. And, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, we have, she was also known as a kind of a mystical mother. And you have Sarojini Naidu, you have Kasturba Gandhi. And, it was as if this space was created and these women were waiting to just fit into that space. So, there was, there didn't seem to be any contradiction. And so the detachment of the quality of sacrifice from Hindu ritual and defining it as a special quality of Indian womanhood, gave rise to this paragon of, because it was, we tend to blame Gandhi for having fabulated this Bharatiya Nari, which did, by desexualizing her, which is right that, yes, it did cause a lot of harm to the power equations that women would otherwise, have made more of if they were not desexualized the way Gandhi desexualized them in the name of purity and spirit, and making them the repository of spirituality, and the metaphor of home and the world, where India is home and the rest of the world is the outside world, and it's the women who become the in the sense that they become the caretakers, or they become the guardians of the nation. And so, well, there is a sense of loss when it comes to the desexualization aspect, but there was no, it seems that at that point of time there was no other way in which a nation which was just coming into existence, if one can imagine the kind of threat that the menfolk felt with with the arrival of the women on the scene. So this purification and this spiritualization and, you know, kind of holding them up to be the representatives of Indian culture was, I think it was a much required strategy. And so Gandhi created the image of the mother as a repository of spiritual and moral values and as a preceptor, you know, for men. And so ultimately, you know, women became worthy of emulating rather than, you know, and this was important also because the image of Bharat Mata was also at stake, because you had to, you know, India was, you know, that because the Indian culture and, you know, the intellectual, we can say, history of India looks at the nation or as the native place as the dharti or as Janani, and it's a feminized, you know, material space that you know, Indians could relate to. So how could one, you know, at the time when Victorian prudery was internalized so badly, and, you know, we were completely under the influence of Victorian morals, how could we possibly sexualize Bharat Mata? So Bharat Mata had to be purified, I guess, and she had to be, you know, given this martyr kind of a status, which Gandhi did very successfully. And you know, and the idea of, you know, but the fact that, you know, I'd just like to add that the fact that he chose to experiment with celibacy at a certain point of time, and he also advocated, you know, he said that rather than, he promoted the idea of abstinence rather than contraception when it came to, you know, family planning. Or so goes to say that, you know, Gandhi was at some level, he was conscious of the threat that women's sexuality has always been since time immemorial. You know, all our ancient texts and all, you know, all our mythologies and what have you, they all talk about, you know, the imminent threat that is there to mankind from the Apsara or from the temptress. So this abstinence, this theory of abstinence, this theory of, you know, celibacy or self-control is nothing but, you know, an acknowledgement. Probably he might not have been so acutely aware of it, but today's historians and, you know, thinkers have kind of, we would read this into it, that there is an acknowledgement of the threat that is inherent in women's bodies. So when the threat in women's bodies can either be converted into, you know, making the woman's body a site for honor. And so this converting of the woman's body a site for honor at that particular moment in history was, I think, it was a much required strategy. And so you know, the image of Mother India and all, you know, it's also interesting to see that we had such great male stalwarts, you know, all the men who actually spearheaded the independence movement, but you have this idea of Mother India, and you have this idea of, you know, of motherhood dominating the freedom struggle. So this is what I wanted to speak about. I don't know if I've,
yes,
you know,
yeah,
all right. So I don't have very much to say. I'm just wrapping up by saying that, you know, that the maternal instinct is by extension the non-violent instinct, and therefore women's movements and non-violence are, you know, they're completely in conjunction with the idea of motherhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're trying to document Gandhi day by day through 5 newspapers from 5 cities in 1947. The bigger project is looking at 47 day by day through 5 newspapers from 5 cities. We're trying to do a little bit of, in a sense, an ethnography of the time from the newspapers. But the first, and what began to happen as we wrote that history was Gandhi was actually becoming a bit marginalized, especially at the beginning of the year, because there were many different stories that were happening, especially since there was an interim government in place in New Delhi, and Gandhi was not in New Delhi for the first part of the year. He was in Noakhali, going village to village, spreading peace post the communal riots. And then from Noakhali, he had to go to Bihar because by then Bihar had really bad riots. So given the way this project was unfolding, actually the first book that will be coming out of the project is going to be Gandhi Day by Day. And in his case, since we reach 31st December and the story is only going to go on for another 30 days, in his case, it is through 47 up to the point that he dies. And so in effect, I know a lot of people here are probably experts on the complete work of Gandhi. I will not claim any such expertise. What I have done, in a sense, is live closely with Gandhi on a daily basis through this last year in his life. Therefore, when we talk about, so when we see that the three subheads for discussion in this session, which are Panchayat, Prohibition, and Village Development, I think he had a lot to say on these because one thing we know about Gandhi is he traveled and he walked through the villages, and that's exactly what he was doing more of in 47. In fact, he regarded Noakhali as his most sacred pilgrimage, and so he discarded his footwear and was doing it barefooted after the first day, I think. And so he had a lot to, and it is, in that sense, if we look at various pronouncements, and I think Gandhi said that about himself too, that if I contradict myself, my last statement is the one that should hold, if I've spoken on the same subject more than once. So clearly what he is, he's on a peace mission, and there is a very clear focus on what is happening in that mission. But that does not, in some senses, distract him from other things that have been lifelong articles of faith with him with regard to the India he would like us to develop or he would like to see. And clearly, no matter how troubled he may be with the status of the communal situation, I think cleanliness in the village takes up a huge part of what he talks about while he's there. So he's there to make peace, but then he will suddenly, give and quite a sharp lecture at various times to people about what he has learned from having been in the West about cleanliness and hygiene, and why, and his basic mantra, which was that, poverty plays a very small part in sanitary conditions. He said it's got nothing to do with poverty. It's a state of mind, and villagers are not listening to volunteers. And it's just a question of making a change. But clearly the amount of time he has spent in the first half of the year talking about trying to tell people that he's against open defecation, why waste cannot be made into compost. I think, they didn't use the word compost in those days. He's talking about making manure, but how things need to be done. This was a huge, it's such a strong article of faith with him that it's not about just the mission he's on, but this is something that comes on again and again. In terms of, I'm going to come back to the village, the Gram Panchayat thing, because as a sociologist, which is what I am, that's the one part of the thesis that I think we have a little bit of problem with, is the whole idea of the village's republic. But apart from that, the fact that he also, earlier we were talking, the idea was to try and see where the women were in all of this. I think two things happen. One, the persona of Gandhi and what he has become by then for the people in the villages is he has access to, in most villages, also to what would be the so-called women's space, if you understand what I mean. People are inviting him into their homes into the place where women are, to be able to look at their homes, look at what is happening. There's a lot of time that he spends there. He makes this big speech on women saying, you are not abala, so I don't like the use of this word. So it's, when you look at it, it's, it was meant to be, it's probably one of the worst crises in India at the time, the level of animosity between communities. But here is a person who is, engaging with it in all of its dimensions. So it's not just that you be, I'm against communal violence, but it's also about the ease with which he can enter this women's space. And there's a level of familiarity, a level of comfort on both sides with having him there, with letting him, and also coming back to the other point, which was his question of allowing women leadership in the movement. Even when he is in Noakhali, there are people from from the Congress in a way, but who are Gandhians. There are women who are in charge of different villages. So, Sushila Nair is at some village. There's this other lady whose name is just, oh God, it'll just come back to me. I'm getting the alphabets confused in my head. She's in charge of another. She actually goes on a fast for a long time because some daggers go missing, and then he has to come in and sort out that issue. So clearly, empowering the women within the organization to go in and lead, spread the message in other villages, which he would be coming to or may not be able to get to at all. But also the fact that he has this ease of being able to go in there and continue to talk about his vision of the village. And to a large extent, that will start with the village being a clean space. And number two, being a space where people will not be what he calls dull. I mean, he wants the villagers to be aware of what is happening around them. And yeah, you talked about picketing of liquor shops. I mean, if I bring it up to current times, we've just seen that in Bihar last year or so, and the whole ban on liquor in Bihar is now being, is based on that, on the idea that it is the women who demanded the ban on liquor. And so despite whatever else anybody may feel, I think in current, in present day Bihar, a lot of women are quite happy with the lack of violence. But of course, there are the other issues with prohibition, which is you set off the other culture of bootlegging in some ways. But if I come back to the notion of Panchayati Raj and the panchayats having full power is one thing. The problem is sociologically with the other idea, which is villages being complete republics. Because I think that idea is, in a sense, a romanticized idea. It's a question of, a self-sufficient village was never a possibility. I mean, villages in India were never self-sufficient because no village in India produces everything it needs. And I think Gandhi himself would have, in some writings, has had to correct that to say, I mean, we should produce, as much as we can, but we should not send out the things that we cannot. We shouldn't only become suppliers to the city. But the fact of the matter is that the village, and I'm saying something controversial, and I hope I'm not left defending it again and again, I mean, to the end of the time of this session. But the village cannot be the basic unit if the only idea connected with it is self-sufficiency, because there's a problem with that idea. In the sense is, I mean, something as integral as salt is not produced in the village. So you're always, when you're talking about villages as republics or as self-sufficient units, I think it has to go immediately with the idea of an interconnected hinterland and an interconnected nation. So the two things need to go together. It is one thing to say that the village needs to produce its own food needs, but even that is, I mean, you know, in terms of vegetables and grains, you can do it. Other items may not all be produced locally. He talked about producing all your own cloth, producing all your own footwear, possible some places, may not be possible some places. So there's a, I mean, it's, if you were to break it down into its units in a pragmatic sociological sense, I think there would be a problem with that part of the, what should I say, that part of the idea, which does not mean that I'm in any sense against the idea as a whole. All I'm saying is it needs to be, in some senses, looked at a little bit more critically and problematized in the sense of how much is possible and how much is not. I'm trying to quickly see what else I had. Of course, everybody in the village should tell the truth and be nonviolent, and you know, there must be harmony, but we know at the time where we are in Noakhali, there is no harmony, and the village is divided, and you are seeing a side of, that was later to be played out at partition, that people you had lived with all your life could in some senses be turned against you in a manner that had not been seen. He wanted no quarrels, no thefts. Now, and since you were not being able to go out there into a village and set that kind of example, I mean, so it's, I think the interesting part for somebody who's looking at Gandhi at that point, and I'm sure the same happened at other points in his life, is he's not just theorizing. One, he's open to change. Two, he's open to correction. And most importantly, he's open to challenge. So, you know, when he does the prayer meeting every evening, and that happens through the year, he's willing to ask the people in the prayer meeting as to what he should say or not say. And are they open to, increasingly with the country getting more communalized, people are saying you cannot have an Islamic prayer and we will not allow you to. And so he will say, okay, I'll not do the prayer, or I'll cancel the meeting entirely. Then at one stage, after canceling a meeting for a few days on the trot, he realizes he's giving in too much to that. So he will then say, fine, I've listened to what you've said, but I'm not going to, you know, I will continue my way. If you don't like it, you can walk. But I think the fact of, and that is what makes Gandhi relevant for anybody, you know, in my generation, younger generations, who are still engaging with him again and again, and I think each generation will continue to do that, is this openness to revision, openness to it always being a dialogue, and being open to change. So I'll stop now and we'll leave the rest for discussion. Thank you.